further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Bill and Tanya.
Well, thank you. That's a very nice introduction.
And first of all, I am so grateful to Bill Boggs for coming in at the last
Hey,
minute.
free
and
lunch,
being
come
so
on.
gracious. Ladies and gentlemen, if you ever have free lunch, this is Bill Boggs.
Oh, thank you. Actually, one technical note. Tanya mentioned the lights are
Is it possible? I'd love to see
possible
some
lower them
faces
about
here.
15%, just because I think they're hurting
can't
our
see.
eyes. Anyway, shall we
Guys, I'd
go
like to, if
ahead?
I may, I would like to introduce three people. First, my cousin and very dear friend, Marianne Grossinger.
In person.
Who, my partner in Mischief and Mayhem, growing up at Grossinger's. And if I hadn't written the book, she probably would have. I'd also like to give a shout out to Jennifer McCartney. Jennifer is the senior editor at Skyhorse Publishing, and she's going to be my editor, for which I am very honored and grateful. And last and definitely not least, Bill Wolfsaw, who is the associate publisher, vice president in charge of marketing and sales, and has become a dear friend at Skyhorse. And Bill, I think you wanted to say a few words.
I just wanted to let everyone know that Skyhorse is terribly proud to have brought back Growing Up at Grossinger's. Bringing back old, lovely books is something we love to do. But I also wanted to let you know that we've just concluded a 2-book deal for Tanya to do 2 more books for us. One will be Memoirs of an Independent Woman, which will talk about her Grossinger years, but also her business years as a writer and a publicist. And trust me, when you read the section about her 6 years working at the Playboy Club, you'll want to read those. You'll want to read the book. And the second book will be a children's book, her first ever, and it'll be called Jackie and Me. And it'll be about her very special relationship with Jackie Robinson, who she met at Grossinger's, and she'll tell you more about that. But I wanted to thank her for inviting me, and thank you for letting us be part of your life and your publisher.
So should we commence the conversation? All right. Well, first let's talk, obviously we're going to be talking about a unique period in Jewish American history, and we're going to be talking about a unique period in entertainment and a unique period in leisure, though. So as we look at the Catskills in general, let's start with the big picture. What is the era we're talking about? Grossinger's is like the summit of that. Who was your competition? Just describe the era and the other hotels.
The Grossinger's began in 1914 as a small farmhouse. It did not start as a hotel. Pop Grossinger, Jenny Grossinger, who's the namesake, the name most associated with Grossinger's, had a lung problem. It wasn't tuberculosis, but it was something akin to that. And they were told by the doctors that the air in the Catskills was so fresh that it'd be to their advantage to go up there, which they did. And then friends wanted to come up and visit. Things do not change, ladies and gentlemen. And they would come up, and Mom Grossinger, Jenny's mother, would say, well, you have to help milk the cow. Everybody had to work. The first Grossinger guests, incidentally, were the parents of the Krindler family that created the 21 Club. So it's all very incestuous in the business. And Grossinger's developed from there. The whole area did not start as a resort hotel area. It started with perhaps some boarding houses, but primarily as a refuge for people who needed fresh air. Grossinger's, and I think the Catskill Mountains as a whole, reached their pinnacle in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s, and then it started to go downhill rather rapidly. At its height, there were 350 some hotels. Now there might be 1 or 2, and I'm not sure about in a second. But I do address that in the book.
It's almost like the end of the big band era. What are the factors that caused the decline?
A number of things. When Grossinger's first started, it was called Grossinger Hotel and Country Club, because it was a time when Jews were not allowed in country clubs, and this was to show that they were permitted here. As we got into the 50s, 60s, there was more assimilation, and there was no need really to say, Jews had their own country clubs of their own, they didn't have to go to a Grossinger's. Also, a stupid word, you had air conditioning. So many people went to the Catskills because it was too hot in the city. Then jet travel, because then it became easier, as a matter of fact, and perhaps even a little bit less expensive to fly to Miami, to Puerto Rico. And instead of the cachet being, let's say most people came to Grossinger's in the summer, at least a great number, from July 4th to Labor Day. They would come in, be greeted, they would ask for Myra the bellhop. They would reserve the bellhop, and they would reserve Sadie the waitress. And good evening, Mrs. Yuck and Flush, so happy to see you, and all the little Yuck and Flush on. But then what happened is that the cachet turned out to be, how many places have you been in a given period of time? Then you had jet travel, and then you had cruises. Now, everybody, there had been a rumor, of course now it actually might happen, but at the time that gambling was going to come to the Catskills. I'm going back now 30 years as the Catskills started to decline. Well, I used to say you can take the bet, what is going to come first, gambling or the Messiah, and I wouldn't take that bet. Now it looks as if it is possible the gambling might come in, but don't count the Messiah out. But this is what happened, and it was, well, it was ridiculous. Okay, there was a rumor going around, this is 30 years ago, that if gambling came in, the only way that a resort hotel would be able to build a casino was that they would have to make $10 million in capital improvements. Rumor. So now you would have a hotel, not Grossinger's exactly, but some of the mid-price hotels, and the owner gets up in the morning, the roof is leaking. Got to do something, he calls in the contractor, and Mr. Contractor says it'll cost $2 million. The guy says, but if I put $2 million now, that's not going to go into my 10 mil that I will need to get a casino license. So he doesn't fix the roof because gambling's going to come in, and metaphorically and literally, the roof caves in. And this happened to an awful lot of hotels. Now in the 60s, you have Women's Lib. They're working for themselves. They don't have to go with mommy and daddy to meet a nice Jewish boy. People become more health conscious. These 8-course, heavily caloric meals are no longer as appealing. The clientele gets older. Now there's a joke actually about two comics meeting at the Friars Club. And one comic says to the other, I just got back from a gig in the Catskills. And comic number 2 says, well, how was the audience? And number 1 comic says, well, there were 2 kinds of people in the audience, the 90-year-olds and their parents. and then television became someone like an Alan King or Milton Berle, who had his own show. He doesn't have to run up to Grossinger's to perform at the Grossinger Playhouse. The performers could be paid more in 4 minutes on Ed Sullivan than probably from July 4th to Labor Day, doubling on every one of the 350 hotels in the Catskills. So they started demanding a lot of money. And the hotels didn't make the money because they didn't have service charges. They didn't have entrance charges. Then they start with conventions. Okay, now we're going to have a lot of conventions, and it changes the audience, it changes the guests, it changes the attitude, it changes the respect for the individual and leisure travel and the family. You have the efficiency experts. They come and they get paid an awful lot of money to say this, that, and the other thing. Then put in a report. Your housekeeping department, you've got to get rid of it. You can't fire Aunt Rose. These are all family-run hotels. And then you finally see that the younger generation wants nothing to do with them. And that was the end of the Catskills.
Well, let's go back to the peak, okay, the pinnacle. Growing up Grossinger's, right? You were, at one point you had to be a student. Where did you do your homework? You lived in a hotel.
I did my homework in what was called the tap room, which was outside of the terrace room where the entertainment was. And I would do my homework where the dance teachers would give a free dance class every day when I got home from school. And so I would be studying American history and hearing the box step to the rumba. Side together forward, side together back. And that's where I did my homework.
All right, that's right. So try to put you, in other words, if Eloise had been Jewish and lived in the mountains, you would have been Eloise. So sort of.
If Eloise had been Jewish, she wouldn't have been in the mountains.
All right, let's talk celebrities, okay?
Celebrities.
The peak, the pinnacle. Who were some of the people who kind of worked the hotel and your relationships with them. And
Well, it's interesting. As many of you probably know, Eddie Fisher worked at Grossinger's. He was supposedly discovered at Grossinger's. He married Debbie Reynolds at Grossinger's.
he was supposed to be discovered by Eddie Cantor, right?
Supposedly.
Supposedly.
And this is where, as a young kid, I turned into the cynical adult that I am now. Yes, there was a gentleman by the name of Milton Blackstone, and he was the public relations genius behind Grossinger's, and Jenny Grossinger. Not a nice man, but he knew his business. And it's because of his efforts that Eddie Fisher was 17 years old. He sang on a radio show in Philadelphia. He was brought to the Copacabana where Monty Proser, who was the the owner, said he needed seasoning. Besides, he was too young to appear in a nightclub. They brought him up to Grossinger's where he was a boat boy. And his only music of the day was at 4 o'clock, all boats in. He sang it on key. And he would sing warm up for the house bands before a show, after a show. He seasoned very, very well. And then it occurred to Mr. Blackstone that if he could get Eddie Cantor, who was a friend of Jenny Grossinger and the Grossinger family, to, quote, discover him, then Grossinger's would get its name in the papers. So it was Labor Day of 1949, and I remember my cousin Marianne, myself, all the kids who grew up there, where they didn't really love us to attend Saturday night shows because we were kids, we were noisy. We were supposed to move around, and when he sang, we were supposed to scream and clap. You know, we were pre-Frank Sinatra groupies or post-Frank Sinatra groupies. And then Eddie Cantor got up there and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, if you all agree that Eddie Cantor's, I'm going to take Eddie Fisher with me on a national tour. He'll be on the show." This contract had been signed 3 months before. And everyone clap, clap, yay, 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 and Eddie Fisher became Eddie Fisher. Then he met Debbie Reynolds at, I think, Walter Reed Hospital at one point. They were both entertaining the troops. And he invited her to Grossinger's, and Mr. Blackstone had another idea. They're such a cute couple. They should get married. They should not have gotten married. But I saw Eddie Fisher the day before his wedding. I had come home, I was a student at Brandeis University. I had come home for a 3-day vacation or something, and I bumped into him walking on the baseball field, around in circles, first, second, third, home. And he was one unhappy soul. And we were friends, you know, and I said, "Eddie, what's wrong? You're getting married tomorrow." And I know. And I started to ask him some questions, and he really didn't want to. And I finally said, "Eddie, why are you doing it?" And he answered, as honestly as he could, "Have you ever had know of anybody who's ever said no to Mr. Blackstone?" And that was the beginning of this very happy marriage. I was friendly with him. Rocky Marciano, who was heavyweight, used to train at Grossinger's for his heavyweight championship battles. It always I could never understand how this sweet, kind boxer could be in a ring ready to kill. But that was his job, and he did his job well. One day, on Saturday afternoons, they had what was called a cocktail matinee, where the Latin band would play, but in formal dress. And Rocky comes in, he's standing at the bar with some reporters, and he sees me dancing a merengue with one of the dance teachers. And I see him, and when we're dancing close, it's a merengue, for God's sake. And when it's over, he beckons me over. "Who's that guy?" And I said, "It's Gustavo. He's a dance teacher. You're not supposed to dance so close to him." I said, "He's a dance teacher. He's on the staff. He's a friend. It's the kind of dance you dance close. You want to dance with somebody, you dance with me." I said, "Rocky, you don't know how to dance." Because everyone knew that. He had no rhythm. It was amazing. When he was back, what's that, the bag, boxing bag, the Marianne? He could hit the Marianne, sorry Marianne, nothing personal. He could hit the Marianne like crazy, could move side together forward. I could teach him that side together back. He said, "Meet me next week." Next Saturday afternoon, I'm there, and he's there. And he said, "We're going to dance." We danced. He was really good. And in the middle, he comes and he says, "You better get close to me, because if not, someone's going to think something's wrong with me." My very favorite person and friend until his last days was Jackie Robinson. And it is because of this very special friendship that Skyhorse Publishing has been considerate and made me proud by asking me to write a children's book. Marianne, myself, all the kids who grew up at the hotel, we were inured to celebrities. You've seen one, you've seen them all. We're kids. Jackie Robinson is coming to Grossinger's. Wow. We stood in line to the PR guy for the hotel, not Mr. Blackstone. Please, we want to meet Jackie Wheel. So we stood in line and we were introduced. And they bring him, Jackie up. Here's so-and-so, so now they come to me. Marianne was a championship ice skater, someone else was a skier, and then there was me. But I could play ping pong. So he said, and Mr. Robinson, this is Tania Grossinger, she's our champion ping pong player. And he stops in front of me, he says, oh, I'm very nice to meet you. How do you do? And he said, how about let's have a game of ping pong this afternoon. How about 4 o'clock? Would that work for you? And I'm saying, yeah. So I said, sure, that would be lovely. And of course, at 4 o'clock, I wasn't there. I was in my room. The phone rings. And this gentleman's voice, Miss Grossinger? Yes. No, never called me Miss Grossinger in my life, so I'm already nervous. This is Jackie Robinson. Why aren't you here? 4:01, I'm in the ping pong room. We played, I don't know whether he beat me or I beat him, but I can tell you that afterwards, we sat, he bought me an ice cream soda. And he had asked some questions about me, which I wasn't aware of. And at a moment he said to me, why weren't you here? And I said, oh, look, at this hotel, everybody says they never do what they say they're going to do. I mean, I know how it works. And he said, aren't you a bit too young to be so cynical? And I said, and I cannot, in my heart, believe I ever said this in my life. I said, Jackie, I'm really being, like feeling awful. I said, I don't know if you understand what it's like to be on the outside looking in.
Well, we all make mistakes now and then.
As you can tell, I was not very close to my family. Our friendship lasted through many years. When I went to Brandeis, he had a party for me. I went to see him and Rachel. I knew his children. In 1953, there was a fire at Grossinger's. And in that fire, it was in a staff cottage, and there were a number of people, staff workers who I know, who died. Jackie was in Brook Dodger training camp in Florida, and he heard of it. 2 days after the fire at Brandeis, I received a handwritten letter, and if you will permit me, I would just like to read this.
Is this the page?
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Sorry.
Hold on.
Okay. And then a few days later came a letter bearing a Pensacola, Florida postmark. It read, Dear Tania, I was so shocked about the tragedy, and I can only imagine how terrible you must feel being so far away from home. I immediately interrupted spring training to write to you and tell you how much you are in my thoughts. At least we can thank God there were others who were lucky. Tania, I hope nothing ever changes your ideas about God and His doing. I know how horrible it was, and sometimes when disaster strikes near, we want to question. But Tania dear, we must always understand. Please, for my sake, try. Love, Jackie Robinson. I still, to this moment, can't say it without choking up.
Now, I'm going to ask you like a historical question. Obviously, Jackie Robinson is one of the single most important African Americans in the history of evolution of civil rights and in sports. There had to be a reason why Branch Rickey, of all the great talented black players who are playing in the Negro leagues, why he picked Jackie Robinson beyond his talent for the temperamental reasons. If Jackie Robinson you knew, what qualities did he possess that really enabled him to do what Branch Rickey asked him to do, which was essentially not fight back? That he had to be able to take it and never ever fight back.
And I think it was that heart that made it possible for him to get past the ugliness and the anger and the stupidity of so many people who acted out their well, anger, stupidity, at him. He was focused, he knew what he wanted, and he was going to get it, and he was always going to be a man he could look at in the mirror and smile at.
Well put. We're still going to deal with celebrities, and we'll move on to a couple other areas. And by the way, if you have questions, we're going to leave plenty of time. Excuse me. Plenty of time for questions. Just shout that out. Red buttons. We'll take one more of the people who worked there and whom you knew.
I'll tell you. Can I substitute Buddy Hackett
Your
instead?
day. Buddy Hackett.
No, for a very good reason. At one point, before this person was a celebrity, there was a young man named Butch Hacker. Butch Hacker was a roly-poly. And who was the fat guy with Abbott and Costello?
Lou Costello.
Lou Costello, all right. Butch Hacker decided that he needed a job in the Catskills. There was a gentleman named Mort Curtis who had an office at the Grossinger office on West 57th Street. He went to Mort Curtis and he said, "I'd like a job at Grossinger's." And he said, "What can you do?" So Butch Hacker waddles around and starts imitating Lou Abbott. Lou Costello, forgive me, Mr. Costello. And it dawns on Mort Curtis, "We have a job for you." He gives him a one-way ticket on the short line bus up to Liberty, New York. And he has a job. His job is to push the guests in the winter down the toboggan slide. And he did that for 3 months. After that, 3 months later, after he thawed out, he changed his name to Buddy Hackett. And he became a performer. Now, he performed at Grossinger's a lot. One of the ways that he got me started in a way of making money when I was like in my young teens. During the summer, guests came to Grossinger's, usually they're reserved from July 4th to Labor Day. And it was hard to book shows because we had 3 variety shows a week, and now you're talking about 10 weeks a year, and they don't want to do the same person twice because the guests say, "I already saw him." They get annoyed. So, but certain people did come twice. So during the week, the comics were sort of like the lower scale. One day there's Buddy's doing a show. Do you remember his routine? Chinese restaurant, one from column A, one from column B, or something like that. He does his routine, nobody laughs. They're sitting on their hands, and no one, it was a disgrace. Show is over, closes, he walks out. And I knew him, from the toboggan days. And I said, "Buddy, I know what happened." And he said, "What happened?" And I mentioned the name of a comic who appeared the week before and had stolen his routine. I said, "He did your routine." So they knew the punchline, so they're not going to clap. They already clapped. At which point, Buddy said, "I'll make you a deal." I always knew who was being booked in advance. He said, "When you know I'm coming, I want you to see the shows that week. And if anybody is doing my routine, I want you to tell me. 1, so I can kill him when I get back. 2, that I don't report him, and I'll pay you $1. And then he told Red Buttons and everybody else that there's this kid up there who will watch and let them know if someone's stealing their routine. So I picked up some very nice pocket money.
All right, let's move on to, we have full 15 minutes left, so we want to make sure we leave plenty of time for Q&A. Food. It was always like food. Let's talk about what the food was like, how it was served. It was massive amounts, massive portions.
First it was lots.
Lots.
Lots of food. But it was very interesting. You would come, let's say someone comes into the menu and they see on the menu gefilte fish. And they say to the waiter, "What is gefilte fish?" Not that would happen to Grossinger's because everyone knew who gefilte fish was. And there were 2 answers. One was, "It's a combination of whitefish and pike." The other was, "Wait a minute." And they would run into the kitchen and come out and say, "This is gefilte fish." And people would order like 14 dishes. "Oh, the dessert menu looks so good. I don't know which one I want. Have them all." In the book, Growing Up at Grossinger's, I devote a few pages that tells exactly how many eggs were cracked. We had a woman who were in the kitchen before carpal tunnel was a real disease. She sat, remember Mary Ann Rosie? She used to sit in front of 2 barrels with eggs. Here goes the eggs, here goes the shell, here goes every day for years and years and years. One day I expected her wrist to fall off into one of the barrels. How many pastries were prepared daily? How many pounds of meat? At one point, I didn't cook. I grew up ordering from a menu. I was about to be married briefly, and I went into the kitchen because I didn't know how to cook, and I said to the chef, "Chef, how do you make a steak?" And he said, "You take 1,000 pounds of..." Not going to work. But food was important, well, for 3 reasons. That's what people came for. 2, people would dress up for dinner. Very dressed up. I'm talking mink coats and diamonds on July 4th. But this was, dinners, especially weekend dinners, was show-off dinners. And they didn't serve wine during those days. I don't remember wine as ever being a part of a meal. But the food was wonderful. I know it was written up in gourmet magazines. I don't remember anybody ever complaining about not liking the food. It was served nicely. It wasn't thrown at the table. It was an event. You have athletic events, you have entertainment events, and now you have stuff your face events.
And in a way, ahead of its time. I mean, if anybody read that article in the New York Times yesterday about Craig Claiborne and the evolution of American food,
exactly.
What you were doing up there was some avant-garde in a way.
Well, certainly there was something for everybody. If someone was vegetarian, if somebody only wanted fruit, if someone only wanted dairy. I mean, there is nothing. I mean, it almost used to be a game. Can you fool the chef? Can you trick him? Can you order something that he can't make? And I don't think it ever happened.
Well, that's interesting. All right, so we talked about celebrities, we talked about food, sex. There must be some stories about guests having sex.
How?
Nothing like that in the book?
They didn't charge them extra if they had it. No, they used to have singles weekends at Grossinger's.
Right.
And
I knew we'd get her there.
And some people, I would be asked by people, do singles weekends really swing? And first I would say, how do I know? Which was a lie. I knew. Secondly, because people were there, girls were there to meet guys. First of all, anybody who was there who was a guest knows the rooms were not exactly deluxe. Because they didn't want you to spend the time in the rooms. They wanted you to be out and about. So for single women looking for guys, they're not going to spend their time in bed with a guy. They could be in the terrace room giving out their numbers to other people. So there wasn't as much, but I was talking about how I made money from Buddy Hackett. When I was a kid, I used to be asked to babysit. And I remember once, the walls were very, very thin. I must have been 11 or 12. And I'm reading a comic book, whatever, great literature. And in the next room I hear all sorts of like, oh, Jesus Christ. And I thought, someone's getting hurt there. I mean, this isn't nice. And when it finally is over, and I hear the door, and I open my door to go out and to see, is everybody okay? And I knew the girl was a cashier, and I knew that the guy was a married guest, and I knew that he put his hand in his jacket and took out $2 and put it in my hand. And said, you didn't see me and I didn't see you.
Citizen's arrest.
And I kept looking on the director when he was coming up again. Of course, there were a lot of people there. Was there sex there? I presume so. As children, I would have to tell you about putting the towels on the doorknobs. If a guy was entertaining in his room and the roommate would come, they would know not to do it. So there was a dorm, sort of a dorm style building called the Brick Building. And Mary Ann and myself and our third partner in Mayhem, named Pat Crindler, one of the Crindler families, would run up and down the halls and take the towels from one doorknob.
Pranks on the guests.
Ladies and gentlemen, there was sex.
All right, let's turn up the lights and see what questions you may have for Tanya.
There was one. There's a woman named Arlen Blake who corralled me and had a question to ask me. Arlen, can you?
Thank you. Sure. What did your family think about the book?
See if we can get the microphone back so everybody can hear this.
The question was, what did my family think about the book?
The book? Okay.
I could probably answer in 2 words: not much. When the book first came out, it came out as an article in the New York Times travel section titled "Growing Up at Grossinger's or Raised Without Reservations." By the end of the week, we had 8 book contracts, and finally it did come out this way. When the New York Times book came out, The Grossinger Family, which I was never close to, I mean, I should have said that at the very outset. Families run businesses, they don't always run families. And I think that this is not unique to people in various kinds of business. And in my particular family, it was not unique at all. The family, Paul Grossinger, who a number of people here have mentioned to me already this afternoon, and his sister Elaine, Jenny Grossinger's son and daughter, were very, very happy about the Times article because it was really quite, said wonderful things about them. They came in from the Catskills, they took me out, blah, blah, blah. Now we have a book. A book is more than a newspaper piece. And I had to make a decision. I could write a glorified press release, which would please them very much and give me access to their mailing list that consisted of 250,000 people. Or I could tell what I really knew, what went on behind the scenes with the famous people, with the family. I mean, I could have really done one of these confidential kind of books, which would have been an immediate success. But I wasn't ready to do that either. So I wrote a book, nice book, but I really didn't do either. After it was over, a very dear friend of mine who is a former friar, Art de Lugoff, said to me something that has stayed with me ever since. He said, I hope you learned one thing from this. Don't straddle the fence. Do one thing or do the other. But by straddling the fence, you're not giving yourself a compliment. So I no longer straddle fences, but I also didn't have a bestseller. When Skyhorse was kind enough to bring it out, we did very, very well, for which I'm very, very grateful.
Okay, another question?
I can't see.
Got one right here.
Go ahead.
Okay. Tania, have you been back to Grossinger's since it closed? And if so, what was it like? What kind of experience was that?
It was bizarre. Grossinger's closed as Grossinger's, owned by the Grossinger family, in 1986. Subsequent to that, there were 4 incarnations. I think choice hotels, condos, but they didn't do their due diligence, and so there wasn't enough water pressure to service what they would have to build. Then another Bank of Japan and Lloyd's of London. That was the first time that I learned you never trust a bank because they didn't know what they were doing. And then a Korean-born Japanese gentleman bought the hotel. I went up to interview him and I asked him why, and he said, because I love golf and I'm very rich. It's probably the most honest answer to a question that Grossinger's ever given.
Golf course open.
At that point, the golf course is still in order, and I understand it's very, very well maintained. But I went up in 1997. I'm a travel writer, and so I thought this would be an interesting story. And actually, it was published in New Orleans, in Boston, Philadelphia, all over the country. It was the weirdest feeling. First, you look at the menu. Okay, a breakfast menu. Sashimi and sushi instead of smoked salmon. Miso soup instead of borscht. No bacon, well there never was bacon. But they had everything revolved around the pro shop. And I'm sitting at the bar interviewing Mr. Min, the owner, and I suddenly hear 3 choruses of Haba Nagila. And I'm looking around, what is going on here? And I see that they have a video of Elaine Grossinger at his, Jenny and Harry Grossinger's daughter, wedding. And I said, what? He said, I don't know. He said, people say they like it. Now, I think when he bought this hotel, he expected he would attract 2 different clientele. Upper middle class, Westchester, Bergen County, Japanese, and upper middle class, Jew. Okay, and it sort of worked because they all played golf. But the highlight of my evening, after going through weeds, I mean, depressing beyond belief, was going into what would have been the club room, but it was like a card room, and all the Japanese were playing pinochle and all the Jews were singing karaoke. And at that point, I knew it was time to go home.
Let's see who else might have a question.
Just a couple of quick comments. My great-grandfather bought a farm up there as well in the early 1900s, and I'm told that one of his sons, the family name is Appel, and they called them Red Apple, so one of them was instrumental in building the Red Apple Rest.
I have met the family of the Red Apple Rest a number of times. That story is unique to me, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
I can't swear to whether it's
Yeah.
true or not. The people that bought Grossinger's in '86 was, the general partner was Schwat, whose cousin was Red Buttons. I mean, it didn't have any connection, but it was the same family at that time.
It's interesting to note that there's a developer in Westchester who bought the Concord at auction for $16 million, and 2 weeks later bought Grossinger's at auction for $10 million. He bought part of Kutcher's, he's bought all the land, and he has pipe dreams of creating a Nirvana, blah, blah, blah. But now the same person who owns Concord owns Grossinger's. Maybe, is there somebody else here that
I was
has a
just going to
question?
say, on the golf side, we go up there every year and play the course, and it's magnificent,
That
as it
I-
always was.
That I've heard.
And the interesting thing is that the people that you see playing along with you, more than 50% speak a foreign language. They come to visit New York, and they know that there's great golf at Grossinger's.
That's fascinating. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, just since Latin music was an integral part of Grossinger's and the Catskills, which Latin musicians do you remember? And
The question was, since Latin music was such a part of Grossinger's history, Catskills history actually, what Latin musicians do I remember? I remember Machito, I remember Tito Puente, I remember Willie Bobo, I remember Charlie Palmieri. There wasn't, in fact there's a CD out on Tito Puente at Grossinger's. I used to love the musicians, really loved them. And at one point I learned how to play trumpet. And through my trumpet playing stages, I ended up at Brandeis forming a mambo band, an all-girl mambo band called Tania y sus Mamboleros. And we used to play at Fort Devens Army Camp, and when the soldiers heard that we were coming, they would yell, ship us out, ship us out. But Latin, I'm not sure what the connection, how it developed the connection between the Jewish people and Latin musicians, but people would come up to the Catskills, and then they would get together, all the guests at all the hotels at Roseland on one day and Palladium on another day, and that was sort of like summer camp get-togethers. How are we on time, Bill?
Well, let's take another 3-4 minutes. Two more questions, if we have them. All right.
What was the most challenging part of growing up in a hotel?
The question is, what was the most challenging part? Well, for me, growing up at Grossinger's, the most challenging part was to get myself to a point where I felt I was accepted as Tania Grossinger instead of Grossinger. When I went to Brandeis, and there was usually fall rush for all the guys to ask girls out, and I was 15 years old, so I mean, I would go out with anybody. And no one would talk to me, and then the week before Easter, all the hotshots on campus would take me out. And after the third date, now I remember it word for word. Oh, Tanya, I can't believe the semester's almost over. We hardly had a chance to meet each other. You're so interesting, blah, blah, blah. Oh, maybe if you could get me a job at Grossinger's for the summer. So that took a little getting over, but I can honestly say I've come past that. Thank you for the question.
Okay, and our final question of the afternoon is really very interesting. It's history, it's funny, it's sociology, it's all blended into one.
Going once, going twice? Question?
No, that's it.
That's it, thank you.
Well, listen, Tanya, thank you. It's really wonderful. It's great. We enjoyed it.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.